Daniel Ogan. He is a counselor with ADAPT out of Grants Pass. He's been counseling now, folks, for over 35 years. He's also been a professor and instructor at the University of Moscow. He taught there for several years and spent and lived in Russia for about 10 years. So, Daniel, you're quite an interesting gentleman. A lot of those parts I want to talk to you about. And so welcome. Nice to have you here today. But your primary responsibilities now is you deal a lot with teen drug addiction. Is that correct?
Well, I deal with teen, adult. It's the spectrum.
The spectrum.
From 8 years old till,
well, full.
Yeah.
So let's go back a little bit. What took you to Russia to teach?
Okay, what took me to Russia in the first place? This was something like 20 years ago, and I wanted to go there. I had a terrible tragedy in my life, and I was at a decision in my life that my bishop, I'm Orthodox, called me up and says, you need to do something with your life right now. And right now, Russia's falling apart, and they might use some of your talents. So I went over there and spent about 7 years smuggling food in, medicine, feeding the hungry. We had a brotherhood there that worked on the streets because there were, I can't tell you, tens of thousands of people who were displaced during the whole fall and the collapse of the Soviet Empire.
Right. So you worked in that area. So then eventually you got over to the University of Moscow.
Eventually I got over to the University of Moscow. I had come back to America and started working again as a counselor. And then I decided to spend 2 more years in Russia because I had this opportunity, and so I taught at the University of Moscow.
Now, the subject is kind of interesting, storytelling. I mean, we wouldn't connect those dots. Why is that so important in Russia?
Well, storytelling is important in Russia because in many ways, who Russia is, their personal understanding of who they were, was destroyed under the communist regime. Their fables, their stories, their faith, their ability to talk in a sense of depth. I mean, storytelling was absolutely a no-no during the Soviet period. In fact, the kind of storytelling I was talking about, and it was a class that generated the art of storytelling to revive it, and it was very well attended. I mean, it started off small, but by the end of 2 years, we were just packing like an auditorium, and it was all young Russians rediscovering their roots, their own what is Russia, what is the soul, and so it was.
Wow.
It was integrated into this.
All right. Now you have taken that experience and you use storytelling as part of your counseling therapy. How do you do that? How do you bridge that?
Well, often people who are experiencing difficulties in their lives are so involved in it that they can't step back and have a perspective of it. And part of the theory of storytelling in counseling, are actually in groups, is for somebody to back off and look at their life as a story. If you were going to have to tell your story, what would it be like? I mean, would it be boring, or would it have ups and downs? Would there be heroes? Would there be villains? And once people see that they're fighting an enemy, like let's just say addiction, which is part of an enemy, and they're and so they can start seeing that, hey, wait a second, there might be a purpose in my story, and so it's just kind of to make them look at things from a different point of view, and so I have them keep diaries.
So you like to use a lot of writing?
Well, art also.
Okay. My sister's an art therapist and a play therapist, and I've learned so much by watching her how a story can be told, especially with young people, and how they play and things like that. Well, I want to come to how did your experience in Russia change your understanding of psychology?
That's an interesting question. I went to the same system of universities, and I was taught a certain aspect of psychology, or what man is, and how you deal with people, the different parts of man. And when I got to Russia, I remember one night we were feeding the hungry on the street, And these people on the street were not like what we might think street people. These were former teachers, former people who worked in factories, normal people who were displaced, and it was a horrible sight. And they would line up, and I saw the most horrible things happen to people at that time because there was no programs to help them, nothing. I mean, you'd either survive or you didn't survive. Many people were living in the railroad stations, and they would have to pay money to rent a little, maybe 15 by 20 foot area for their family. Wow. And there was this one family coming, and a young family with two young little girls. I think they were like 9, 7, and they would come quite often. And one day I noticed that it was only the girls, and I went down and asked them, well, where's your parents? And they had witnessed their parents being beat to death the night before by the police. Wow. Wow. And so at that moment, what kind of counseling are you going to give that person?
Yeah,
I mean,
all of a sudden, that's not university textbook stuff.
Right. Yeah. I mean, here, this person would have post-traumatic stress and grief issues and go to, years of counseling. They don't have that.
Right.
Say it's not available. So what are you going to say to these 2 little girls, or to the hundreds of others or thousands of others who are out there? They don't have, counseling here in America often is like a hobby. Mm-hmm. This is life and death situations, and it's attacking the human spirit.
Right.
And so there is no counseling in that kind of situation. It's an immediacy. It's the human warmth. I mean, as I looked at the young girls, everything kind of flew out the window, so to speak. And, what could I give them?
Right.
Help bear their parents, I mean, it was what I could do, but more importantly, what could somebody do for the shock inside them?
Right.
But I learned something, that in Russia, they don't know that they're supposed to be post-traumatic stress. They don't have this. They don't know what all the terminologies we have. Oh. They understand the concept of survival. They understand the concept of death, of pain, of suffering, and it can come for anyone.
What about love?
Oh yeah, that is that is surrounding it all.
Right.
But how it changed me was I started to see that there is, I call it reality therapy in a sense. Yeah. That we are capable as humans of much more than we think. Right. Another thing that happened was I happened to be there when a lot of the Christians were being released from the Gulag. People had suffered for 10, 15, 20 years in the most horrible situations. And I'm sitting around the table with some of these people who are like living saints. I felt absolutely in the company of living saints. And But my question as I started to interview them was, how did you survive? What got you through this?
Yeah.
And they had their survival had to do with their idea of God. All of us are subject to pain, to sorrow, to this. And also their faith in God, and another thing is a sense of humor. And I thought, a sense of humor? And they go, they were telling me that in Russian Orthodoxy, one of the signs of possession of a demon is lack of a sense of humor. And they would say that they would know when somebody was in the Gulag, when they were losing it. They lost, even if it was dark sense of humor. That sense of being able to look back at things, and it's not the whole, it's a process. Right. And that's how they survived it.
That's fascinating. All right, so somewhere between your university training, you're experiencing life and death issues by helping street people, and your faith. It changed you.
Exactly.
All right, so now you're back in Southern Oregon, Grants Pass, and you're a counselor with ADAPT. And how did all that experience now bring you to a table when you're sitting across, say, with a teenager who's strung out on drugs? I mean, do you go to the textbook and say, well, you have post-traumatic this, or you got this syndrome or that syndrome? I mean,
okay, well, I have to play 2 roles. Okay. First of all, we work with insurance companies.
Yeah.
We work, in the real world. So yes, you have to do a normal assessment and analysis and follow the language.
Right.
So, I follow that line of thought. But when I look at people, I look at them differently. Meaning, I'm not as concerned about their drug use as I might have been. I'm not as concerned about some things. There's other things that I am concerned about, meaning that their lack of hunger to live, their absolute bent concepts of survival and what life's about. I mean, drugs are just the symptoms of something else.
Right.
I mean, somebody could come to my office and they could quit using drugs or quit drinking, and yet that in itself is not going to change who they are unless they have something that they believe in, something that they're going towards. Because just to be, you know, as young kids would tell me, a good girl and good boy, what does that get me?
There seems to be this spirit, if I could say, of no hope. They don't see a future. They're not working towards anything that if I invest now, it'll pay off later. That kind of thinking is gone. I shared with you a story just over the weekend dealing with someone, and I was shocked to find out that his greatest prayer was, I hope I don't wake up. How'd this happen in a modern society?
That is a difficult answer. There's not a simple, this is in my opinion, but it's based on years of experience. But I think I can look at one thing, and it's not the only thing, but it's a significant. It's a concept of accepting responsibility for ourselves and our actions, and not having other people, not looking at other things, blaming, you know, bitterness, anger, resentment. These are all a person who has not looked at themselves and what their responsibility on this planet is, what I call reality therapy. If I have somebody who comes to my office who's been using heroin for 5 years, they've lost their kids, let's just say a woman, and she's broken. She's come to, I don't know, you know, if she's come to the bottom, but she's come to me for some advice and some help. And after I show empathy, after I, you know, listen to her story, as kind as possible, I would say, you know, you need to look in the mirror and look at yourself and say, I'm responsible for where I'm at. We have such a victim mentality. This is one of the, it's like a disease. We're all victims. To take responsibility, well, it was my mother. It was my Uncle Henry. It was somebody else. And yet, and when I was talking about Russia, about these two little girls, they are not going to be able to use this horrible event, the death of their parents, as an excuse. They're either going to survive or not. Now, it's cut and dry there. It's black and white. And here in America, it's not so black and white. We have so many different avenues, and we are taught from day one to look at environmental factors that causes us to be what we are. Or if somebody is angry with the church, I don't love, you know, I don't believe in God because of this, or there's 1,000 reasons. And yet, very few people who will look in the mirror and say, I am exactly where I'm at. We'll go back to this young lady in my office because of decisions I made. No Uncle Henry, no nothing else. I'm taking responsibility. And then that's when healing starts to begin. You know, of course, there's always the spiritual aspects, but we're looking at, right now, maybe, you know, we're looking at the symptoms that can fit everyone here. When you're asking why are young people where they are, and I've talked to when I talk to young people, it's like I ask them, I said, look, I need your help. I don't come to them as if I know anything. Why are you cutting yourself? You know, I can't figure that out. And humbly I'm asking them, not with judgment, or why are you doing this? And you're right, they will say because of I don't believe in the future, or things are not going to be around anyhow, or this world is a terrible place, or I hate my mother. But once you get to a point where they start accepting responsibility for who they are, meaning there was a short period of time when, like from 0 to 6, that yes, we are under, you know.
You know, there's a part of that, Daniel, that, and I experienced this, that it's the next layer down, where they don't want to take responsibility of themselves, and to suggest that you as the counselor would say to them, you know, you need to take responsibility of the decisions you've made that got you where you are, is kind of like added weight that I'm a failure. And I'm tired of it. I don't care. And I'm bumping into this I don't care attitude, or the whatever attitude, the give up attitude. I mean, here we are living in the most modern culture on the face of the earth, and we have an epidemic of young people who don't care.
That's interesting, though. When you say that somebody might say, and they will, the added weight of, you know, I'm a failure. Well, you stop there. And this is where we go into, let's look at your life. Now, let's just think, for example, what do you think, you have to ask this question, what is the purpose of life?
Mm-hmm.
Why are you here? Now, if you don't have some kind of philosophy or faith,
then you are a wanderer.
Yeah. But so we ask that question, and of course where I'm working at is a secular program in some ways, and so I can't like tell them that, you know, the answer is our dear Lord.
Yeah.
But certainly I can lead them to a point, and you'll be amazed how many of them come to that point, well, I don't know why I'm here. And I go, well, that's a question you have to ask and think about. And many of them come back. It has to be something spiritual. It has to be some kind of training ground. I don't know. I mean, and I said, well, you're getting close.
All right. That's good advice. Let's fast forward this, because we're running out of time, and I'll have you back. But I want to fast forward to that. What are some signs that you can tell a parent to look for if they begin to feel and sense their child is slipping away?
Well, first of all, the first obvious sign is you don't have the communication you once had. And I'm not talking necessarily just verbal communication. That sense of being part of your family, and you start feeling this wall. Well, there's a sign right there. If somebody is cutting you off, you know, I'd look into that. I mean, it could be a number of things, but that right there is one of the first signs where the communication and that bond seems to be cut off. Mm-hmm. You know, you can feel that. And it's not like you're looking for red eyes or something.
Right.
But, you know, we need to trust our gut instincts with one another. We quit trusting them. A mother and father who are good mothers and fathers, they have a gut instinct for their children.
Yeah, they do.
Trust that. Something, you start feeling something, listen to that.
Okay. All right. We see them shut down. They won't come out of the room. Maybe their style of music changes, their dress changes. These are all indicators, obviously, but and they're shocking to parents. Parents sometimes have a tendency to overreact when this happens. What do you say?
No, of course. I mean, when you can't be a dictator.
Right.
You know, part of our job as parents is to teach our children to have responsibility of themselves and to be independent. So we're teaching them independence and responsibility, and in that realm they're going to make mistakes. What better place to make mistakes within the family unit is safe than going out into the world and making these mistakes. So music, you know, some of it we're not going to like, but more importantly, I would think, is the communication.
Okay, so when that goes, would you suggest forcing somebody in the treatment?
You know, that's a great question, because I've just read some statistics on that forcing somebody into treatment and somebody going by their own will and their own decision, the success rates are the same.
Huh. I wasn't expecting that answer, really.
They are the same.
Wow.
You could go on, you know, do some research yourself.
I was not expecting that answer.
When I read this, and this is, you know, this is a long series of research on the success of inpatient treatment centers. It's the same.
Well, so interventions, do you believe in them?
Oh, yeah. Interventions are key. Because interventions, you are being proactive. You are seeing something, you know, and there's all kinds of interventions. You know, it doesn't have to get down to the bottom line.
Do you coach interventions?
Oh yeah, I've done a lot of interventions.
So you've been involved in them, but will you recommend interventions with a professional? Or could a family do an intervention?
Okay, Now that's up to, that has to do with
we
the
may
family.
have to have you back on that. We're going to run out of time.
Okay, but the
yeah.
family, yes.
Yeah.
I am the believer that the best counselors are not the professional. I believe this.
Okay.
I believe that there are many gifted counselors in families, and you don't have to go to a professional.
Right.
Sometimes for something specific like addictions, of course,
Yeah.
it's not going to be done
Yeah.
within the family unit. But I'm talking interventions. The best ones are when family gets together and are proactive.
Wow, good stuff. Where's your office? How can people make an appointment with you, or can they, or how's that work?
My office is in Grants Pass on 6th Street, Adapt. You can't miss it. It's right past the courthouse. And
there you go. ADAPT counseling. You can check it out there. And Daniel Ogan, I want to come back. I want you to come back. Let's get into this intervention thing because, and I love that statistic you just gave us. So forcing somebody in the treatment versus voluntary, the results are the same.
It's the same.
Wow, that's powerful stuff. Will you come back?
I'll come back. Thank you very much
good.
for asking.
All right.